on the east side, and sort of in there's a few like bars and restaurants and stuff around that in that area, like at least 50% probably of the places, which is not like hundreds or anything, but maybe out of
Dozens.
30 or 40, like 20 of them would accept BCH, something like
Yeah.
that.
Hey everyone, I once again have the fantastic pleasure of speaking with the one and only Jeremy of the Bitcoin Cash podcast. How's it going, man?
It's going great. I'm loving life. Just got
Yeah?
back from St. Kitts yesterday morning. Nice 7-hour flight on the way back. It was 10 hours on the way over, so I don't know what was going on there. Maybe just we got through the refueling and the stop in Antigua a bit quicker, and I think we also had better winds. Maybe but I didn't know that plane flights could be that different in length between the same two places. But I guess over
Yeah.
longer plane flights, the variability is higher. I don't know.
So there was this Bitcoin Cash conference. Is a big deal, and it lasted a weekend, I suppose, but you were there for like 2 weeks total. Is that kind of more like it?
Yeah. So I was there from the 9th to the 23rd on St. Kitts. The actual conference, technically, the conference was like one day. It was on the 12th, but they were sort of, in the days leading up, people were arriving and there was stuff going on. And then the days after, there was people hanging around. So there was more stuff going on. And then I had, about a week at the end there where most of the people had left, but there was still a couple of people around. And just hung out in St. Kitts. It's a beautiful Caribbean island. The weather was amazing. Everyone's super friendly. So you can't exactly go wrong spending any amount of time. Really.
Yeah. Well, I was installing a wood stove during that same time, so a little bit different climate-wise. But do you mind just going over real quick just the overview of the conference experience, and then we'll kind of dive into details. But just like kind of what happened, what were you struck by, what was the big stuff, the big takeaways, etc.
Yeah, well, I guess the background is that Bitcoin Cash obviously split off from BTC in 2017. And I don't know what happened in 2018, but in 2019, there was this conference in Townsville in Australia, which has, one of the most Bitcoin Cash adoption in the world, the Bitcoin Cash city, so-called. So that was obviously a chance for the industry to sort of solidify a bit in terms of all the people who'd been filtered out from who was on the BTC side and who was on the BCH side. I think that was also that would have been also after the BSV split off as well too, right? So it was kind of quite a good chance for people to meet face to face, because it's such an online industry and everything tends to operate a lot like that, as I'm sure you're very aware. So then there was no conference or anything in 2020 and 2021 because of the pandemic. And so then in 2022, it was the first time that there'd been a real BCH like mega meetup conference type thing in several years. And during which the eCash fork had also happened. They'd also split off. So it was another chance for everybody to get face to face in terms of who was actually there. So I didn't go to the 2019 one. I wasn't as deep in the crypto at that particular time in my life. But I definitely wanted to go to this one because now I've been doing the podcast, and it was organized in St. Kitts, which is a small Caribbean island that I basically never heard of before this, about 50,000 residents, but that can sort of fluctuate because there's also about 10,000 international students there. They have some really good medical and veterinary schools, so they have a bunch of them. And then they also have cruise ships coming in with like 10,000 people at a time. So if you get in 2 cruise ships, that's 20,000 people, and the whole island is only 50,000 people. So it can like fluctuate quite a bit. And there's actually I thought there would be less going on, to be honest, from 50,000 people. But I guess it's a very tourism heavy place. The island makes most of its money from tourism. So, most of the people there are very obviously familiar with there being tourists and kind of happy that you're there because that's how they all make money and,
of course.
and live. So that was it. And the reason it was chosen as the site for this event was because the guy who hosted it essentially is this guy called Sunny Gahani,
the Lord of St. Kitts.
Yes. So I think he's a Kittitian citizen. by now anyway. But he's like from India originally, and he's been in St. Kitts for many years, and somehow like maybe a year and a half ago or something like that, he got interested in crypto because, well, I don't actually know how he got interested in crypto, but he did one way or another. And he got super excited about Bitcoin Cash of his own accord, it seems. And
Yeah.
so he found Roger Ver, who, famous crypto OG that was sort of heavily involved in the Bitcoin Cash. Well, he actually wasn't involved at all in the Bitcoin Cash fork, but since joining onto Bitcoin Cash has been, quite a prominent figure there. So he basically tracked him down because he knew he was also living at the island, and then they talked about it and everything, and then Sonny just went like ballistic on Bitcoin Cash basically. And so he's a local business owner. He's in the sort of alcohol and like restaurant kind of industry. So
Which is
he has a
perfect for the
number of,
tourist kind of vibe of the island,
yeah,
I'm sure.
exactly. It means he's linked up with like loads of what's going on there. And he also does a bit of other stuff, but that's like his bread and butter. And so he obviously, the first thing he did was he put Bitcoin Cash in all of his businesses and then started paying some of his employees in Bitcoin Cash. And then he's also just a very outgoing like guy. And so he knows so many people on the island. So just going around onboarding people, super excited about
One
Bitcoin
could
Cash.
say he even had a sunny disposition.
Yeah, it's very the sunniest.
Yeah.
Once you maybe, or just you can look up videos of him
Yeah.
online. He's a very energetic, outgoing guy, and so he onboarded a bunch of businesses as well too. So then Bitcoin Cash adoption basically just like took off a bit on this island. This is all in 2022, essentially. Maybe a little bit at the tail end of last year, but essentially this year. Uh, and so, it being the end of the year, he was like, "Let's just have a conference here and get everyone in, so they can all see the adoption and spend some coins into the local economy and all of that." So I think that was basically how it came about.
Yeah. It's so the conference itself, right? First off, you have, I'm sure, hundreds of people showing up. And kind of the feature of the conference is to be spending, BCH all over the place. Before we get into that, because that's kind of like the highlight of this whole thing, how was the actual conference part of the conference?
Yeah, it was good. I thought it was a very busy day because it was essentially one day. Like it could have probably been dragged out to being 2 days, but I guess when you have a bit more than a day's worth of content, if you fit it into a day, then that makes it action packed and everyone's really hyped up. You don't want to be sort of dragging it out. Like the Bitcoin Cash community is obviously it's actually a bit amorphous because in some ways it's one of the largest communities in crypto because everybody knows about it and everybody's heard of it and been involved or not involved at a lot of stages.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual, hardcore day-to-day sort of numbers might be smaller than obviously BTC or Ethereum or something like that. And also being in St. Kitts rather than in America or in somewhere centrally located in Europe means it's a bit of a trek to get there. But yeah, they just had it over that one day, and the talks were really good. There's a full live stream on YouTube, so anybody who's interested can go and watch kind of everything that happened on that day. It was kind of in three sections, where the first section, sort of before lunch, was a bit more sort of theoretical. It was talking about the background of Bitcoin Cash and kind of where things are at in the movement, a little bit about the history. And then there was a really good talk by John Nieri, who's worked for General Protocols, and he was explaining about AnyHedge, which I already knew a lot about, but a lot of people apparently didn't. And that was the favorite talk of everyone I asked, what was your favorite talk? That was the most popular one. So that was explaining about AnyHedge, which is a solution for hedging volatility on Bitcoin Cash so that you can essentially make a kind of decentralized stable coin and also speculate without having any counterparty risk. So that was one. That was like the first section, which was all. So AnyHedge is now a real thing. It's now been released, but it's still sort of in early beta. So that was the first section. And then the second section was more about like practically speaking. So there was a talk by some of the merchant onboarding people, Bitcoin Jason from Townsville, Ryan Giffen from Florida, Marcelo from Argentina. And so it was a bit more like brass tacks, like how are we actually implementing this in terms of getting people on board and doing daily transactions and stuff like that, which finished with an announcement from the team of Zapit, who are a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and they announced that they've integrated Bitcoin Cash through their wallet into the Indian UPI payment system. So you can now pay essentially anywhere in India. It's like 60 million merchants
Wow.
plus like a ton of other places, just straight out of the wallet. And then basically what they do is they then sort of convert the BCH on your behalf and send the rupees out to the merchant. So you've got sort of a one-way adoption. So they made that kind of big announcement in the second section, and then the third section was the sort of legal tender section, where part of the hype of this whole conference was about, oh, maybe we can get Bitcoin Cash as a legal tender in a country. Obviously, St. Kitts is a small country, so the wheels of power are perhaps move a bit faster there. And if you know, like all politics, if you know who to talk to, you can maybe sort of sneak your way in there. So the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis gave a talk, and he announced that the country would look into making Bitcoin Cash legal tender and also Bitcoin mining, which nobody was really expecting, for March of 2023. So he didn't say that they would do it by then, but it was like there's a
That's a
good
target.
chance. Yeah, there's a good chance that they might, and if not, there'll at least be, you know, some research or some committees or whatever that will sort of explain what went on. And then Rolando Bryson talked in that section as well too. So he's one of the members of parliament for St. Martin, which is one of the nearby countries of about the same size. And so he also just talked about why it's important to get legal tender, and you know, the fact that he's also looking into that in his own country. So it was like a 2-for-1 deal. Like it could be either one really.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty interesting and exciting. The legal tender thing in particular is something I've been kind of like side eyeing for a while, because obviously BTC in El Salvador is the number one kind of use case, or the number one kind of thing people have on their mind for that. And then there's been some African countries, I believe, that have like bandied about the idea of a more general legal tender type thing. Do you have any idea if this is like, obviously they talked about BCH, but did they say this is going to be like the one legal tender cryptocurrency and other ones will be still not treated as like universal? Or like, do you know how that specifically would shake out?
Yeah, well, there wasn't really much mention of a lot of other cryptocurrencies. I mean, obviously, if Bitcoin Cash got made legal tender, it would certainly sort of lower the bar or make it easier. Well, I guess it could be taken either way. I imagine that it would make it easier for another country, another currency, you know, to get the same status. But to do that, they would kind of have to put in the work of convincing the, you know, the local government and everything like that, which would be a maybe actually quite a high bar, because the Bitcoin Cash community have done it by actually establishing a lot of real commerce on the island. So it
Yeah.
was kind of already like growing organically and, you know, bringing in benefits and stuff. And then obviously with the conference, it brought in a huge amount of people and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, maybe in one sense it could be, well, there's a precedent, so maybe it's easier for another currency. But on the other hand, it's like you're now competing with Bitcoin Cash directly. So it might be harder. I don't think that they were planning to specifically make any other cryptos, like not even Bitcoin BTC, legal tender in that case. I do know the St. Martin's one from MP Bryson was going to specifically mention Bitcoin Cash and maybe Bitcoin as well. I'm not sure, but I think probably just Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I heard reports from El Salvador about, when a lot of merchants were sort of, told that they should, adopt Bitcoin. A lot of them adopted a point of sale system or some kind of merchant solution that accepted a few different coins, and then you just have people kind of piggybacking on with that something. So when we have talking about the attendees, right? So first off, what percentage of the attendees do you think used Bitcoin Cash on a more than just like a single trivial transaction?
like 100%.
So it was like
I don't know. It would have
100%.
been,
So
yeah. It
basically
would have,
everyone there. Do you think
yeah.
how many do you know just basically didn't touch fiat the whole time?
I know of at least three, but that was like people that I asked specifically. Like
Hmm.
it could have been much, much more. Like could have easily been anywhere between 20 and 50 people, especially some of
Hmm.
the ones who were there like the shorter amount of time, who I
Yeah.
maybe didn't chat to as much. I mean, if you're coming in only for a couple of days, it would have also been much easier because you would have been like in all the conference stuff, right? So you would have come to the hotel which accepts it. You would have gone to restaurants like with everyone else who was going out for BCH stuff, so it would have been there
Hmm.
to uh yeah, so it would have been, I know for sure definitely a few people. Like me personally, I spent 2 weeks there, and I think I did about like 6 fiat transactions or five and a half,
Hmm.
two with taxis, or one and a half with taxis. I onboarded one of my taxis
Hmm.
during the ride, so I was able to
That's
pay
nice.
half in BCH, and then one in when I was getting taken back to the airport. The guy wouldn't go for it. Although he said he had used Bitcoin in the past, but I don't know, he'd had a bad experience or something, so he wanted to use fiat. So I went, that's fine. And then 4-ish times at the grocery store just in the second week when I was
Hmm.
there. But for the rest of it, for 2 weeks, I don't know how many transactions that would have been, but a lot. The rest of it was all in Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah. It's so um sounds like they're like the entire conference experience surrounding that was all like obviously people can find ways of paying for their airfare, and then the hotel that it was at accepted it directly. And I know there's a bunch of sites and stuff that let you do travel stuff with crypto anyway. So then, of course, in the hotel, right? I'm sure there's like a hotel, restaurant, bar, and stuff like that that probably takes it
Yeah,
as well, and some other things. And then obviously a few surrounding like restaurants and things right around the hotel. But like
yeah.
outside of the conference curated experience, what was it? What was the adoption scene like? Is first about what percentage roughly, or what how many merchants kind of accepted it outside of just that like hotel ecosystem?
Yeah. So I like quite a lot. Like not, definitely not none. Definitely not 100%. It's not like you can just walk around the island and go absolutely anywhere and you'll find Bitcoin Cash. But there's sort of several sections of the island, I guess. So there's the hotel is on one side, on the east side from memory. So on the east side and sort of in, there's a few like bars and restaurants and stuff around that. In that area, like at least 50% probably of the places, which is not like hundreds or anything, but maybe out of
Dozens.
30 or 40, like 20 of them would accept BCH, something like
Yeah, and
that.
so that's kind of like the
uh
tourist heavy section, sort of.
yeah, and obviously it's near the hotel as well too, so it would have benefited a lot from everybody
Yeah, of
everybody coming in
course.
there. Then you have the area that's at Port Zonte, which is near where the like cruise ships come in. So there you have a bunch of like stores selling t-shirts and mugs and St. Kitts merchandise and like that kind of stuff, right? As well, I guess stuff that the locals are interested in as well, like to like whatever they're washing and whatever businesses that like a tourist doesn't really need, but the locals have. It's just a bit of the commercial area. There's a bunch as well too. Again, it's not everywhere, but maybe like 10% or 15 15% maybe of those kind of businesses. uh, Other areas that are not those two I didn't really look into as much, but I heard some people say that when they went to some areas that were just like where the locals lived and stuff, it was like 0%.
Hmm.
And then also scattered around here and there in between those three areas, there's still like a bit of Bitcoin Cash adoption in places, right? So it's not everywhere, but it's also like you definitely notice it. I had talked to a couple of people who were not involved with the conference and everything, uh, and were not locals, other tourists, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here for the Bitcoin Cash conference," and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I really saw like those stickers around the place too, as well, because there's also like signs on the island, like some of the electronic billboards have ads running for Bitcoin Cash. When you come into the airport, there's a big thing that says Bitcoin Cash. earn, spend, replace there, and there's signs next to the road on some of the lamp posts that are like Bitcoin Cash. So there's enough that you get the idea
Yeah.
definitely, but it's certainly not everywhere.
Yeah. So, like usual, I guess you'd expect the touristy slash more developed slash more technologically developed kind of areas much heavier with that, and then the when you get sort of into the more average common folk type thing, it's kind of more like they're aware of that over there, but that's not like for everyone
Yeah.
necessarily. Now, of all these places, first off, what percentage of the places that take crypto there that you've noticed were BCH only, and were there any ones that were a little bit more general like that? They took like a few of them.
No, just BCH everywhere. Like I didn't see the only time that I heard any local talk about any other crypto was one guy that I talked to who told me that he was kind of interested in it because I think him and his brother were speculating online,
Mm-hmm.
buying and selling different coins. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I mean, most of the places that are accepting, they just use the Bitcoin Cash register app, which, as far as I'm aware, doesn't support any other cryptos. They just have Bitcoin Cash accepted here, stickers, they take Bitcoin Cash. And I mean, it makes sense why, like, there's not one of the big things with crypto is that whole network effect. You know, people get some and, oh, what can I use with it? Right. Well, everywhere except for Bitcoin Cash. So why would you want anything else? So you don't have
Yeah.
anybody demanding anything else. So it's kind of just locks you into that cycle a little bit. So yeah, nowhere was accepting anything other than Bitcoin Cash, I'd say.
And so the register app is what most of the businesses in the whole country were using, right?
Yeah, some of them had the register app. Some of them just had like wallets on their phones. That kind of that was how they were doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those were by far the two most. I think maybe one or two had like a Go Crypto type of terminal, but I
Mm-hmm.
yeah can't remember that specifically. So I guess maybe that might have accepted
Mm-hmm.
another type of coin, but I don't think maybe one was like that.
Yeah. So the conference goers. First off, what was the most popular wallet you saw people use?
Yeah, definitely the Bitcoin.com wallet, like by far.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the biggest, and it's got the best sort of user experience. So that was the biggest by far. I did also see people using the Paytaka wallet and the Zapit wallet as well. I didn't really see any other sort of like multi-coin type of wallets. Didn't see so much of that. Maybe one or two other things like people were working on sort of their own custom tech, you know, a little bit at the fringes. So a
Yeah.
couple of people working on things there too. Obviously, it was a good chance to try that out. So yeah, I think that was kind of the spread of wallets. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I've always been struck by is when I go to crypto events or conferences or something like that, there's a bunch of enthusiasts who are. There's very few people who. First off, it's surprising how many people don't have a phone wallet. Like they don't have crypto on their phone, and they have to like learn like right there. And also, even people who just have a phone wallet with some balance use it so rarely. Like, and I don't mean so rarely, like every few years, but like a few times a year, to where there's like these bumps and bruises that happen. Like, oh, it's not synced right now. I forgot to open it in time, or like, hang on, the Wi-Fi thing here, or then they're not super familiar with like the input method. Like, if they scan a QR, it's like the wrong address format. And they just don't know how to handle that in that moment. Did you see a lot of like excited newbie bumbling kind of when people are like, oh, I'm just so excited to use this, and then there's just a little friction because they just haven't done this a whole lot. They're not used to using this as money.
Not really, man. Everybody was just like, "This is crypto. This is what we're all here for." Like everybody just
Mm-hmm.
used it smoothly. I mean, it's not that everybody at the conference was like a total veteran or anything, but like a lot of them were, and then a few people that had joined the ecosystem. Kind of, there was people's like business partners or somebody's like girlfriend or whatever that had come along kind of attached to somebody else or for another reason. Uh, they they just saw it happening around them, so they understood it all very easily. And then obviously either beforehand or during the event, somebody showed them, here's a wallet, download it, here you go. And when everybody else knows what's going on, and like even the restaurant like staff and stuff, they have the process down pat. They just put in their amount, show you the QR code, scan, send. That was it. Like a couple of the places was a bit more bumpy into, oh, we forgot to charge the phone, or like something like that happened a couple of
I really
times.
hate that. I've run into
Yeah,
that a few different times. Just charge your
yeah,
damn
but
phone.
yeah, but the thing was, even when that happened, it wasn't so much of a big grief. Like it wasn't that they were like, "Oh God, this thing that we have to do," or "I
Yeah.
don't know how to do it," or something like that. It was just like, "Oh, we overlooked it," and they were always happy to sort of facilitate it. I didn't, yeah, really have the experience of one time we went to a business that said they accepted it, and then it turned out that they didn't. But it's like that wasn't, it wasn't a restaurant or a bar. It was a t-shirt printing shop. And when you have a big concentration of people there who are already trading crypto, it's really interesting, because then it just becomes almost like a decentralized DEX anyway, because even if people were in scenarios where they couldn't pay specifically in Bitcoin
Yeah.
Cash, it's still like if you're with other people, it's like, oh, this one guy will pay in fiat and then everybody pays them back in crypto. Or people were trading, physical cash for Bitcoin Cash on like a couple of occasions, or that kind of thing also was able to smooth over a lot of the bumps. So it wasn't really like going to an ETH meetup and discovering that nobody had actually ever made an on-chain transaction outside of MetaMask. It wasn't anything like that.
Yeah. So, was there a lot of fiat shaming going on? Like every once in a while, you see someone use fiat for something, and people would be like, "Oh, what are you doing, bro?" Did you notice any
No,
fiat shaming?
I didn't notice any fiat shaming. No, I don't think anybody did that. I think everybody was pretty committed to use crypto as much as possible. And I think in the cases where it wasn't, it was usually like, well, we're paying this, somebody's going to pay this tab in fiat so everybody else can pay them back in Bitcoin Cash. And that was like, well, that's it. We're facilitating the maximum amount of crypto usage given the constraints of the situation. So, yeah, I don't think there was anybody being too sort of maximalist about it, but everybody was just so excited to be there and having fun
Yeah.
using crypto that they would just do it. It was like, why would you want to spend fiat if you could spend crypto?
Yeah, of course. It kind of reminds me of the early days of Bitcoin, which is it's like one of the most like cringe Bcasher things I could say. It's like, oh, back in the early days when we used to, all like go out somewhere and then someone would pay the tab and everyone would all pay them back in Bitcoin and all this kind of stuff. It's like very much
Yeah.
like the early days community stuff. So when you get you kind of get outside the conference now, like both physically and in terms of the time. And a lot of people go home and stuff. You kind of get a more real sense of not like the possibilities because you already saw all those, but like more what the day to day life is like. It's so. Did you? What was your sense from spending at merchants after the conference, or maybe ones who hadn't been at like different areas, as far as like how frequently they kind of receive payments?
Yeah, I did ask a few of the merchants, do a lot of people come in here and do they pay in Bitcoin Cash or do they not, and whatever. And it was kind of like, yeah, some places it's kind of infrequent, and some places it's like semi-regular, I guess you could say. So a couple of them were like, yeah, people come in here and pay in Bitcoin Cash. So I didn't see lots of the locals using Bitcoin Cash, but they clearly do, because the staff were like, yeah, it just happens. It's not like everybody just flooded in here for this one day and then we never saw anyone again for a year. Like there is a bit of a circulating economy. Like I said, Sonny has the businesses and he pays all his employees in Bitcoin Cash, and I guess there's probably a couple of other sort of businesses and related things like the crypto that they're taking in. It would be easier for them to pay their staff or to pay it on to the next place than it would be to sign up to an exchange and sell it. Maybe they do, or something, but I think the coins do actually circulate a bit on the island. So yeah, it's not like anywhere is like going off with just Bitcoin Cash necessarily, but it's also not the case that it's hype for 1 or 2 days while everyone's there and then everyone's gone and it's nothing.
Yeah, once Jack Mullers isn't doing his stunt anymore, it's like it's not quite that stuff.
No,
Uh,
no, it's not like that.
yeah, so one of the things that I hear most people complain about from like the normie slash merchant perspective in terms of using it, especially small business owners, is the price fluctuation type stuff. Did you hear much talk about that? About like, oh yeah, it's great, we love it, and pay man, but I wish the price didn't crash. Or do you hear any like kind of concerns about like the volatility?
A little bit, but not actually all that much, right? And I think there's a few reasons why. The first is because the majority of people using Bitcoin Cash on the island understand that it's a currency, right? Because they see it being transacted and they see merchant accepted here stickers and so on and so forth. So I don't think anybody's putting all their like money in it and then praying to get rich. What they're
Mm-hmm.
doing is they get paid in it and then the next day they spend it somewhere, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the more frequently you are in contact with the BCH economy, it's kind of like a natural dollar cost averaging, right? You're going to earn
Yeah,
a
of
little and then
course.
spend a little and earn a little. So I think because there's a good amount of that going on, that certainly helps with the volatility. Then I think there's also some Bitcoin Cash ATMs on the island that you can just go along to and you just scan it and send in some and you get some USD out, or you can buy in the same way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think those are probably fairly heavily used by anybody who needs to avoid the fluctuations. Because on the island, right, you have Bitcoin Cash and then you have US dollars are used a bit, and then also the EC, which is their like local Caribbean type of currency, but that's pegged to the US dollar like roughly. So it's about 2.7 to 1 with the US dollar. So I think yeah, if they just cash out for USD or buy back in from USD when they need it, yeah, I think that does. There was certainly a little bit of like okay, volatility, but not that much.
Yeah, which it's I guess that makes it a lot easier to do adoption type things in tourist and touristy kind of areas, mostly because it's like a lot of travelers and multi-currency elements. Like if you're in, the German countryside, it's going to be like all euros probably, and then no one people are going to say get fucked if you want to do something
Yeah,
else. Whereas
yeah,
like El Salvador, for example, where their own currency just doesn't work, so they're just using dollars, and then you got other stuff, and then it's like, oh, all this tourist stuff going in. It kind of makes more for an easier, more fertile ground. Same with Venezuela, with just everything
yeah,
crashing all the time, and it just makes it's kind of interesting. Like this, a lot of people in major countries, right? Like the UK, Australia, US, kind of get used to like this is the one money, and they don't want to. They're kind of set in their ways. Whereas if you go to places pretty much anywhere else, right? I mean, even the UK, like if you're not deep into the UK, if you ever hit the mainland of Europe, like there's the pound and euro difference is always kind of gonna be a thing. But yeah, it seems like these like the the tourist slash highly traveled places seem to be a great place to convince everyone to get on board because the locals, as it were, never are like the first to use it ever. And if you can promise them enough non-local traffic, so to speak, then that makes sense to do the adoption.
yeah. And that was pretty much what happened. I mean, I think yeah, I was quite impressed with the whole thing. I don't know what I was expecting. Like, it certainly could have blown me out of the water and just had everywhere be accepting Bitcoin Cash, but I certainly saw enough to conclude that yeah, it wasn't just kind of like a setup for the conference and oh, come to this exact bar and like yeah, okay, there
Mm-hmm.
was a little bit of that, but even outside of that, there is traffic and business and commerce going on the island in Bitcoin Cash regularly, and to the extent that we all came and spent a bunch of coins pretty perfectly timed, maybe at the bottom of the bear market, then whoever is
They'll be
still
happy.
hanging on to those coins, yeah, they'll be loving it. And once it goes up, and like of everyone I talk to, everybody knows about Bitcoin too. I mean, that's true sort of generally in the world, but people on the island all know about Bitcoin specifically because
Mm-hmm.
they see the stickers and they see it being used a little bit here and there. And they were all sort of yeah curious or interested when I talked to them about it. You could obviously see when I asked, some of them were kind of like withholding judgment kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but they were happy to talk to me about it. And if they had any problems, say okay, I don't know about this element or that element, but a lot less than you would get generally. Like if, I mean, that's also just time. Time is slowly washing away everyone's objections, basically. But there specifically because they can see it being used and they can connect the dots that this was bringing in tourist money and helping the local economy. I think they were a lot more open to it generally.
Yeah, now time to put on my like hostile maxi hat for just a second, my UASF hat, whatever. Were there any confusions or particularly confusions, right, between the real Bitcoin and this green thing that everyone's using? Like, did everyone know this is the cryptocurrency called Bitcoin Cash and that's what we're using? Or did some people think, is this Bitcoin? This is the Bitcoin. I heard Bitcoin in the headlines. Is that the one we're using here? Like confusion between those, or was there also people who were like, we know this is not Bitcoin scam core whatever, but this is the real Bitcoin. Like, is a sense of from the sense of the locals. What do they think they're using? Do they know what they're using exactly, or do they think that it's BTC or what?
Well, there was no confusion, but the reason there was no confusion is because to everybody there, BCH is Bitcoin. It's the kind of Bitcoin Cash dream or ideal of what we're kind of trying to get to.
Yeah.
Is the whole point is we're just going to just wipe away all that FUD by people know it's Bitcoin because they use it. So I talked to a lot of people and I said to them, "Oh, do you accept Bitcoin Cash?" And stuff. I started doing that a few times, but when I said Bitcoin Cash to them, they they would sometimes like mishear me. I guess I also have an accent, right? They use a Caribbean
Yeah.
accent. So they thought then sometimes that I was offering like Bitcoin or like cash, like USD
Yes.
cash. So I stopped saying Bitcoin Cash. I just said
start saying
Bitcoin, and
Bitcoin.
then I had no problems. And everybody there, I guess they would know if you quiz them with a chart or something because they see all the stickers are all green,
Yeah.
right? So they would know
It's
that
the green
like,
one.
the green one. They would know that, and so yeah, nobody has any confusion about it. But the reason is because they were like, this is Bitcoin and Bitcoin is BCH to them because that's what everybody used. And if you gave someone BTC, they would probably then they would find that a scam because they would go and try and pay for something
It's the
and it
wrong
wouldn't
one.
work. And they'd be like, what the hell? What is this bullshit?
Yeah.
So
So if you get like Peter McCormack shows up in St. Kitts and is like, "Oh, you take Bitcoin. I want to spend Bitcoin," and obviously you couldn't because it's the wrong one. Do you think people would have the awareness to be like, "Oh, that thing, that's the other Bic. You can't use that one. You got to use this one," or would they just be like, "What the hell is this? This weird orange thing?" Like,
maybe if he got lucky and he found somebody who was really clued into all of it, but most likely I think they would just be like, we don't want that. Like, what are you talking about? Uh, yeah, he would just. I did talk. I talked to one Maxi while I was there. Right, it was actually pretty funny.
where did you find
Very,
him, Maxie? Did he come to the conference, or was he just in St. Kitts and hadn't been driven out yet?
yeah, he didn't. He didn't realize. I think so. He was just happened to be staying at the hotel while this conference was going on. So he was there with his girlfriend, and so I got chatting to them. I didn't know that they were like Bitcoin people or anything. The girlfriend wasn't as much, but she just said like, "Oh, you like Bitcoin? Oh, my boyfriend, he likes Bitcoin. Like, why don't you talk to him about it?" So so I said to him, "Oh, you know, hey, you're into crypto," and then it turned out he was this real like toxic maximalist type. So we had this kind of on the spot debate where he told me that like nobody takes Bitcoin Cash. It's a scam. And I was like, well, what about like 10 meters away over there where I can pay in
So
Bitcoin
was he
Cash?
just unaware of where he was?
Well, yeah, I think he was just like Bitcoin Cash is a scam and nobody cares about that. And I was like, you're in the middle of a Bitcoin Cash conference, mate, and just look around. There's stickers everywhere. So we had this really weird debate where, yeah, it's just like those online debates, you know, where it just comes down to, no, you're wrong. Like there wasn't actually any.
Yeah.
It was like nobody accepts it. And I was like, what about all these places? And
What about
he
the whole
just
city?
had to keep repeating, like, nobody accepts it though. And I was like, that's reality has proven you wrong. But anyway.
So it wasn't even no one accepts it for the like on the whole in the whole kind of the whole world. It's just this is an exception. But he was even saying here no one accepts it except for like the hotel bar and a few other places.
Well, yeah, it's just, you know, when you have one of those discussions with somebody
Yeah.
and they're just cognitive dissonance has just like overloaded and they know they're wrong and they're going to be really salty for a few hours while their brain tries to kind of process what has just happened. But yeah, anyway, it's pretty interesting talking to him because yeah, he just didn't. And then he was trying to tell me that Lightning was like so much better and like Bitcoin Cash is insecure. And I was like, how is that the case? And he said, well, people can double spend you. And I said, all right, well, we'll walk over to the bar. You can double spend me right now. Like, what are you going to do about it? And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, but only if, not if it's a small amount. And I was like, so all the people trading here, they're fine, right? And then he was, no, it's insecure. Like there was,
Yeah.
he could, it's hard to process that maxi stuff when it is actually happening around you, kind of thing.
It's kind of funny because for the end user, the local end user, I would guess, again, I have to, at some point, I'm going to travel to all these places and see for myself. But I guess that the end user has a very similar experience in El Salvador as in St. Kitts, where they have a little phone app that says Bitcoin on it. They scan a QR code, go boom, and it's a fraction of a cent or a couple cents or whatever it is, and they pay. And just Bitcoin's everywhere. I wonder what the perception is amongst the local populace that's cued into this stuff, but is not like crypto people. Like, do you think the average merchant in St. Kitts that takes Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, thinks, I'm sure they've heard El Salvador in the news somewhere. Do they think that El Salvador is like the exact same thing going on there? Or do you think they have a perception that they're doing something different over there? And I guess vice versa, right? Although the St. Kitts news does not travel, like because it's much more segregated to Bitcoin Cash communities. But assuming they did hear about that, I wonder if the average non-crypto person who's still using it because they're there, I wonder if they think that the exact same thing is happening in both places, even though it's in some ways the exact same thing, in some ways extremely different.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I asked maybe one person about El Salvador. Now that you mention it, I sort of feel like while I was there, I wish it had been more in my mind. I would have asked a few more people about it. But uh, I think I would say that the easy answer is that the El Salvador people probably don't even know what's going on in St. Kitts. Like, to the extent that they know about Bitcoin, I think for the most part it's localized to what's going on with them. So I doubt they're reading up on the St. Kitts stuff. For the St. Kitts people, I think they would. Some of them would be like, oh yeah, okay, Bitcoin's kind of happening here, and maybe it's kind of happening there. That would make sense if you weren't involved in Bitcoin Cash on St. Kitts, but you lived there, and then you read something about El Salvador. You just kind of be like, okay, maybe that's going on there too.
And in your
If
head,
you
it's
were
probably the
involved,
green one. It's still the green one, like
yeah,
here.
probably. But then if you're involved in Bitcoin Cash in St. Kitts, and then you read an article about El Salvador, you would probably know enough to kind of pick apart that there was some difference, I guess. If you saw, the icon was orange in the El Salvador article or something like that, you might be like, what's going on here?
They
And know the
branded it
difference.
differently. I mean, they probably
Yeah.
also don't really know what either is. They just know it's this like digital money. They don't know this decentralized thing. They must think it's like a company, like a PayPal, like a.
Well, yes and no. I definitely had, yeah, I had a couple people sort of ask me about that because I had a shirt, right, that had Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
Cash podcast on it. So when I was in that grocery store, which was the one place I went basically that didn't accept it, just because it was the closest and the most convenient. If they onboarded them, that would have been brilliant. And we did try, but it wouldn't fly at that moment. But the staff was still curious; they were still really interested, right? And so I had the Bitcoin Cash podcast shirt on, and the lady at the checkout said to me, "Oh, are you part of like the Bitcoin company?" And I said, like, no, it's not a company. It's like the US dollar, but I make a podcast about it and I'm involved with it. This was just in passing. It wasn't like we had any great chat about it. But I think some of them kind of have a bit of a sense that it's like another Venmo or PayPal or something like that. But I think increasingly they're sort of getting the idea that that's not it. I mean, education is viral in the same way acceptance is. Like, every
Mm-hmm.
person that uses it and gets involved and then asks a few questions, they can then pass that knowledge on to somewhere else, especially if
Mm-hmm.
they're a regular user, if they're actually getting their salary paid and then they're paying this person and that person, right? So I'm sure the knowledge will filter out to everyone over time. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So this last one is, I mean, I guess is a tricky question, right? But obviously during this whole thing, during the last few years, of course, because I'm very focused on crypto as money, I've noticed that transaction volumes for pretty much every cryptocurrency that's useful as money remain relatively low, and maybe BTC has higher because it's like a couple 100,000 a day or something. But even then, the overall fee revenue generated is very low compared to EVM type chains. There's a lot more actual business going on there. The payments use case is like it's there and it works, but it's very still fledgling, even though it's the oldest use case. It's like people aren't doing this a ton. And so then you're looking at like the Bitcoin Cash transaction volume. There's no perceptible like conference bump from there, which there shouldn't be if it's just like one small conference compared to like the world, right? But it's still like it's very limited. It's like $50 a day in like fees generated by the whole network, all that kind of stuff. So I guess my question, and this is a question that I don't have the answer to, but I'm just I'm wanting to know if other people have something closer to an answer. What's it going to take for that to start ticking up to where now we're going to see like 450,000 Litecoin transactions a day and like 800,000 Bitcoin Cash transactions a day with some like actual fee revenue coming in to sustain after the block reward comes out? What do you think it's going to take for that to start like kicking off the way like DeFi and NFTs and other things have kicked off the kind of EVM chains?
Yeah, well, I think I've got two sort of immediate answers, but yeah, they're kind of attacking the problem from different angles, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I love Bitcoin Cash, among many, is because it's one of the few that I would say has this kind of synergy going on. So the first one is that adoption as money. It's just as simple as that. Like money has the stickiest network effect, which is why it's been so hard, among other reasons, for crypto to get in there. But once it does start getting in there, it also can snowball pretty fast. Like on St. Kitts, the fact that people are using it, even it's one of those things where if you get 10% of the population regularly using it, the difference between 0 and 10 is probably as big or bigger than between 10 and 100, right? So
Yeah, of course.
You can see that it's not at 10% yet, but maybe if it's at 2% or 5% now, you can see it's sort of starting to tick up, and there will be a moment where it will just take over like the whole island. Now, the thing about it being on an island is that firstly, that means it's kind of easier to get the ball rolling, but then it's also harder to spread it onto the next thing and the next thing. But like I said, Rolando Bryson in St. Martin, he's been looking into it, and in Antigua as well, they have a lot of shops and restaurants and stuff as well. I had people telling me about seeing the signs there and everything too. So there is a way that Bitcoin Cash could just snowball kind of along the Caribbean, along all those small islands, actually used as money in a real economy, which would be amazing. And then, yeah, so it does need to get like viral momentum as a currency at some point. That's definitely a part of it, and that's unavoidable, and that's very hard. But the Bitcoin Cash community is, I would say, the leading the industry in actually doing that work. So it's not like we're not trying. And then the other element to it is that you need to have some stuff that is not money to help drive the wheel, so to speak. To give people a reason to come check out the chain, to offer yields, and so on and so forth. So the Bitcoin Cash community had Smart BCH for a while, and technically still do, and that brought in a bunch of people. And if they can figure out the bridge and reback the coins, or that's in a bit of flux, but in theory, if that gets rolling again, that can also drive it. And even absent that, we've now got Cash tokens has just been locked in, as it's now in sort of the implementation phase, but it's been locked in and it's going to get rolled out in May of next year, which allows you to do most of what the EVM can do, but directly on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain. Not porting the code across like Smart BCH, but you can make the same things a different way around. And I'm sure that's going to create, just like it did on Smart BCH or any other chain that has a whole market of tokens and coins and yield farming and dexes and all that sort of stuff is going to go on there. And that's one of the reasons why people were really excited about the AnyHedge thing, is because they're kind of like a forerunner of that, because they were able to make their decentralized app, which has been driving transactions and getting people interested in stuff using paying on-chain fees, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is already starting to happen there. So hopefully those two things are then synergistic, right? Because if you have people using it as money and then their wallet is also offering to them, oh, you can also do all this DeFi stuff, then maybe they get involved in that. Or maybe they come for the DeFi, but then kind of get onboarded into the payments experience by default, so that's the answer. And then the answer to actually having sustainable fees is basically global adoption, right? That's the Bitcoin Cash strategy. It was the original Bitcoin strategy. You have to be doing mega volume, which
Yeah.
of course you need mass adoption for, and you need the tech for it as well too. Like you can't just decide, oh, our chain's going to be the global adoption chain, because if you're doing that, you have to make some very specific choices, like
Yeah.
you know,
You have to actually grow. Yeah,
yeah,
in a strange way, of course, it's kind of analogous to the coffee shop of crypto legend, where you like if you are a consultant or an accountant for whatever, there's a few different job descriptions that you can have like a small handful of clients, and it's a very small part of those clients' lives is their business with you, but you still make a great living. Whereas with a coffee shop, you're making pennies per transaction. You need a lot of people not only interested in coffee, but then you need a lot of them to like not just a coffee every few, couple months, but you need them to be coming in like several times a week. Like you just need a lot of it, and then it works. But it's like it's one of those really tough ones to get going, and I think that that's probably why like the EVM style chains have been so profitable is because they offer those use cases where you could get a lot of money, a lot of activity from just a few people, not a few, but like, a smaller group of people, but then also a portion of their lives is dedicated towards this. Whereas to get the same amount of revenue from that you get like some casual once or twice a week Uniswapper, to get that kind of revenue from like payments on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, you need dozens and dozens of people living entirely off of Bitcoin Cash probably to just
yes.
recoup that. And it's just a taller order at that point.
Yes, it is, but there's a silver lining, like all these things, which is that once you've done that work, then you've become like unreplaceable. Like a lot of these Uniswap people or whatever, when the fees went up, well, they all fucked off to another different chain. Right? They were
Yeah.
just like, okay, change my MetaMask and like see you later, Ethereum, and the same thing will happen over and over and whatever, right? But
Hmm.
like what we were talking about before, if Bitcoin Cash is the one. Okay, if there was a catastrophic issue, then maybe things would change. But for the most part, once they're using Bitcoin Cash for payments, they're not going to care about any other coin for payments, because why would they? Everyone they know accepts BCH, and that's a self-perpetuating sort of
Hmm.
phenomenon. And once the more often you use it and the more you get involved, then the more you see the potential of it, and the more you're maybe willing to give back as well too. Like people who are on the island, there was one guy who did a bunch of like a tour for us and some taxi rides and stuff. He had been accepting Bitcoin Cash for a while, and so he got a lot of business because of this conference, which I'm sure was boosting him up ahead of his competition. He said the other taxi drivers at the like taxi cab rank were starting to ask him like, why is everyone going to you? And he said, well, it's
Hmm.
because I accept Bitcoin Cash. And so at least one of them was like, get
I'll do
me
it
in on
too.
that. So yeah, so then he downloaded the wallet and he showed it to him and all that stuff, right? Give him the
Yeah.
5 minute crypto onboarding. Here's how you send. Here's how you receive. Here's how you back up your seed phrases. Okay, good luck. He was himself like perpetuating that, right? So again, it's kind of a viral thing. Harder to get the wheels going, but once you do, you've got incredible sort of lock in and brand loyalty, I guess.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, shill, even though you've done it a bunch of times on my show already, shill yourself, your show, wherever you want to point people to.
Yeah, if you're interested in all of this, join the revolution, bitcoincashpodcast.com. You can find the Bitcoin Cash podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts, basically. And I did 3 kind of episodes in St. Kitts. I did one live before the conference where I talked to a few of the attendees who were there. I did one on the day of the conference where we talked after, just sat down on the couch and stuff. And I did a third one afterwards with Rolando Bryson, the MP from St. Martin, which I would say is one of the best episodes that we've ever done. It's amazing. Anyway, I don't know when this is going to come out, but we're editing that up now, and we'll get that out soon. It's on
Yeah,
Twitch now, but
probably
yeah, that'll
three
be out
days
soon.
from now. I'll put this out.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we'll have it out by then. And yeah, the audio quality on a couple of those was a bit scrappy because I'm not used to doing them face to face. And the first one that we did, suddenly like there's all these frogs that chirp at night in St. Kitts. So it got past a certain time, and all the frogs just started chirping, and then that
Interview
kind of messed up
over.
some of the yeah, that kind of messed up some of the audio. But yeah, if you're interested in Bitcoin Cash or what happened in St. Kitts or whatever, yeah, check out my podcast.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for being on, and we'll see everyone next week, huh?
Thank you.